Amen. None of the kids are here to do it. All right, we are going to be in Habakkuk chapter 3. So if you want to open up Bibles, phones, apps, whatever it might be, we are going to be in chapter 3. But it is important to talk about chapters 1 and 2 as well, because that provides a lot of the context for what Habakkuk is talking about. Habakkuk was a prophet in Judah around 605 BC. And this is basically, the book of Habakkuk is a back and forth between Habakkuk and Yahweh. There's not a whole lot going on as far as addressing Israel specifically, which is kind of a little bit uncommon when you look at all the prophets, major and minor. This is basically just a revelation. This is a picture of what Habakkuk is going through, which I think is really important because it provides just an honest conversation that is an example for us. Because a lot of us can't relate to Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel sending forth these big, bold words to kings and nations and priests. A lot of us don't feel like we are in that situation or ever will be. But all of us can relate to those times where we just have a grumbling, a complaining against God, and we need some resolution in our life. Amen? Even if we don't want to admit that we have complaints or issues or arguments with God, if we're honest with ourselves, we do. And this is just a really neat opportunity to see just one example of how this is laid out. So when you start off in chapter 1, which for those of you counting at home is 2 chapters before the Haftarah portion, Habakkuk has complaint number 1. He's basically having this need and this complaint that there's all sorts of violence and destruction going on around him. Verse 2 says, "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear, or cry to you violence, and you will not save?" This is Habakkuk just being very honest. There's death, there's destruction, there's violence going on around me. We have times where we come before Yahweh and we're like, there's hurt, there's sadness, there's sin, there's separation going on all around me. God, when are you going to answer? When are you going to give me some degree of resolution, of revelation? And then in that same chapter, God provides an answer. He was going to raise up and use the Chaldeans or the Babylonian Empire, which I think if you're Habakkuk and you're part of Judah, God's chosen, righteous, set-apart people, and you're going through all of this hardship and you're saying, God, please save me, wouldn't you expect it to be something really nice and godly and compassionate and full of His righteousness? That would be nice. But God says, no. We're going to go the exact opposite direction, and I am going to use not only the people that are against me, but the people that are putting you and will continue to put you in exile to save you, which is such an amazing concept. Verse 13, Habakkuk says to God, "You who are pure of pure eyes than to see evil and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he?" Why would God have the Babylonians, who are more violent, more unrighteous than Judah, be the ones who are being, in a sense, glorified and used for God's purposes? You move into chapter 2, and this is God's answer. He gives Habakkuk and us ultimately hope about God's timeline of when He will do things and what He says He will do. So Habakkuk is upset because Babylonians are going to be used to deliver, and then he is saying, hold on. We are going to deal with this in right order. Habakkuk 2, verses 2 through 3 says, "And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come, it will not delay." This complaint that Habakkuk has towards God is going to be answered by God. He just doesn't say exactly when it will happen. But he says, in that time, it will be quick. When it is time for that, it will be quick. If it seems slow, wait. How many of us have had that turmoil, that tribulation, those things going on in our life that are hard, and we're like, God, please answer. And He goes, I will, quickly. But if it seems too slow to you, hold on and wait. And Habakkuk has to go through the exercise of learning to trust God and say, I have an issue. You say you're going to take care of it. When? And God says, hold on. I'm going to take care of it in my due time. What God is about to reveal may take a long time before it all takes place, but it will surely come. Then you move into verse 2, chapter 2, verse 4. This is a popular verse. Most people have heard this at some point in time, but it gives comfort to Habakkuk about God's view and Babylon and Judah. This is Yahweh talking about Babylon. Behold, his soul is puffed up. It is not upright within him, but the righteous shall live by his faith. Have you heard that before? That's spoken of 3 times in the New Testament. Paul uses it, and the author of Hebrews uses that same phrase. It is saying no matter what is going on around you, no matter what your lineage is, no matter what your ancestry is, no matter what you think is happening, the righteous will live by his faith. That is not only a picture of the immediate rescue and salvation that Habakkuk and Judah needs, but it is a picture of us as believers in Messiah, how we are to live and how we are to have right standing before God. It is not by the rescue of other things. It is not by the rescue of man or technology or healing or medicine or science or counseling or psychology or whatever it is. That is not what brings us into right relationship with God, because the righteous are the ones that live by faith. It is the righteous who have a belief and a faith in a God who saves, even despite we are just fleshly, carnal, sinful, nasty human beings. But when we live by faith, when we have that faith in God's protection, God's salvation of us, that's how we are to live. So God basically spends the rest of chapter 2 woeing, not wooing, but woeing. You're not sure what that means. Woe is them for this, woe is them. That's how he spends the rest of chapter 2. But the actual Haftarah portion starts in chapter 3 with Habakkuk basically recognizing God's power and accepting that decree of what he will do to Babylon. Chapter 3, verse 2, O Lord, I have heard the report of you and your work. O Lord, do I fear. In the midst of the years, revive it, which is kind of a humbling thought when he's saying in the midst of the years that God is going to deliver this. Not in the midst of days, not in the midst of weeks or months, but he's saying in the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. Chapter 3, verses 13 through 14, Habakkuk recognizes what God is going to do for Judah and to Babylon. It says, you went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. That is the complaint. That is the first complaint that Habakkuk had towards Yahweh. Why is there violence around me? Why is there death? And God is saying, I went out for the salvation of you. Habakkuk is saying, you went out for the salvation of your people, for the salvation of your anointed. You crushed the head of the house of the wicked. This is him talking about Babylonians. Laying him bare from thigh to neck. You pierced with his own arrows the heads of his warriors, who came like a whirlwind to scatter me, rejoicing as if to devour the poor in secret. Then verses 16 through 19, this is Habakkuk's final acceptance of God's answer to his 2 complaints in chapters 1 and 2. Chapter 3, verse 16 through 19 says, I hear and my body trembles. My lips quiver at the sound. Rottenness enters into my bones. My legs tremble beneath me. Yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon the people who invade us. Habakkuk has heard God's answer to his problems, his complaints. And he's saying, even though all this stuff goes on, even though my lips quiver, rottenness enters my bones, yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. Though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. So here are a few takeaways for you, if you would like them. If you don't, they're takeaways for me, and I'll take that away, and you guys get whatever you want from it. All right. So, when you're struggling with something in life, which all of us have in the past or are right now, you don't have to raise your hand, but are you having certain struggles in your life? Yeah. As it was mentioned before, God always moves and opens our eyes to his movement right before the feast days. If you haven't seen things taking place in the next couple or in the last couple weeks and months leading up to Shavuot, there's still about 24 hours. So God may start revealing things to you if you're open, if you want that to happen. But when you're struggling with something in life, no matter how small or severe it may be, have an honest back and forth conversation with God. As it has been said, does he already know what you're thinking? Yep. Does he already know what you're feeling? Does he know what you're fearful of? Does he know what you're hopeful of? So just stop messing around and have the conversation with God and just be completely open. Be willing to have the back and forth where you lay out your concerns and then wait for an answer. Notice the complaints that Habakkuk gives in this book are not lengthy. When you look at the complaints that he writes down, it's a couple sentences, and then he waits for God to give all of the different prophecies and statements that he's going to give. So here are 4 takeaways that I had from Habakkuk chapters 1 through 3. When you are going through an issue, wait expectantly for an answer. Know that our God is going to answer, and you hold on and you wait. It said in chapter 2, verse 1, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what Yahweh will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. Number 2, recount God's character and his works. You've laid out your complaint. You've laid out your problems to Yahweh. You said, this is what is hurting me and concerning me. And while I'm waiting, I am going to recount how amazing you are, God. I'm going to spend time. I've whined long enough. I've gone through my problems enough. Now I am going to recount how great you are. It said in chapter 3, verse 2, O Lord, I have heard the report of you. Your work, O Lord, do I fear. Habakkuk is saying, here's all the stuff that you have done. All the ways that you have proven yourself faithful. And now I will wait for that to happen. As an aside, this is one of the beauties of being in community with one another, is that you might not see all of the works that Yahweh has done in order to build up that good rapport with you, but you know who has? The majority of the people in this room. And so when you are struggling to remember how great God is and all the ways that he has proven himself faithful, just look around you. No, we did, just as a personal thing, we did the slideshow for my daughter up there. She is a picture of God's faithfulness to me. That is an amazing work. There are stories I could tell about her and how God has protected her and blessed us in the process. That is a picture of God's faithfulness. And unless you get into community, you do not get the chance to see that. Third takeaway, trust that God will answer in his time, not necessarily ours. Chapter 3, verse 16, yet I will quietly wait for the day of trouble to come upon people who invade us. As I read through this Haftarah portion, the word yet kept coming up because it is basically saying all this stuff is reality, yet God is going to do this. I may be struggling with this and this and this, yet God is faithful. Despite everything that is going on, I serve a much bigger God and I live in a much better kingdom. And the fourth and the last takeaway is rejoice in advance. You saw what Habakkuk did. He laid it out. God said he'll answer. And in the meantime, he recounted God's grace. He recounted God's actions. And then he rejoiced. Similar to a couple verses before, chapter 3, verse 18. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. And Habakkuk ends, we don't see the deliverance. We don't see the salvation. We don't see the resolution to all the complaints that Habakkuk had, but that didn't matter to him because he had faith in a God who was going to save him and save his people Israel. So I'm going to pray for you guys and for this day again, if you don't mind, and then we'll continue on. Father, thank you so much for your word. Thank you for your word that is living and active, that even though it was written thousands of years ago to a different people, in different situations, it is nonetheless applicable for us. May we approach every bit of your word and every bit of our time together in honoring this Sabbath, and may we look for you in it, and may we just seek to honor you and trust that we will be blessed, and just trust that we can bless you in some way. So we love you and pray this in Yeshua's name.